Hey, peace, family. This is Ikemba Ajore coming with another episode of the Blueprint for Black Power study session. I'm Ikemba. We Charge Colonialism, a grassroots think tank focusing on collecting data and putting out information that's going to empower our people to understand the conditions that we are living under as African people. And so I'm in the office today. I'm going to try my best to focus on this camera. I got a lot going on around me. Um, but, one of the things that I'm always hesitant to do when I start these is to go right into it because I know some people are going to be joining this session when I'm about to close up because I like to keep these like really short, somewhere around 8 to 10 minutes. Sometimes I go 20 to 30 minutes. It's all about how things are flowing, but my intention is to keep it short, to like really go into the text, the Blueprint for Black Power text by Dr. Amos N. Wilson. I'll read a paragraph or two, examine it, put some information out there, put my perspective on it, and then, off to the next one until next time. Because the idea, like I really want to go through this book thoroughly, and I'm hoping that I can inspire our people to not just study this text, but to find ways to begin to implement this in our own communities. And so, if I have people where I'm at in Philadelphia and Brooklyn studying and implementing this, and wherever you are, if you're doing the same, then hopefully, we're able to form like Voltron. I know that's cliche, but be able to form and be able to build this Black nation on a large scale, but it's going to start where we are at. So, with that being said, I want to get into the text, but make sure that you subscribe to our channel, Recharge Colonialism, our YouTube channel, and you can also share the channel. Share the channel with others. It'll be good. I just imagine that we have 1 million people joining this session and talking about Dr. Amos N. Wilson's work and the mindsets of those people and what they're going to be doing in their community. So in order for us to like spread this information and to help make this sort of thinking contagious is for us to share, each and every one of us to share this with our family and friends. So with that being said, I'm going to get into this text where, again, reading the Blueprint for Black Power. This is the Black Power study session. Left off on page 9. Under force as power, and I'm going to be reading from the third paragraph. So I'm reading from the third paragraph on page 9. Let's get into it. So force per se, rather than being utilized as the primary and exclusive means of exerting power over another, may serve more. I'm going to stop right there for a second. Let me just make sure that I'm able to be heard. All right, for sure. It's peace. All right, cool. All right, as long as I can be heard. So I'm gonna get into it. So force per se, rather than being utilized as the primary and exclusive means of exerting power over another, may serve more to reinforce or back up other forms of power relations to be discussed below. That is, force, although a reality in many social situations, achieves its full scope by undergirding other types of power. In so-called advanced societies like the United States, force is more likely to be applied as the final persuader or arbiter when compliance is not attained by other means, right? So I'm gonna stop there before I continue on, because this is important as well. Again, looking at our relationship as African people, looking at our relationship with the colonizer. In order for colonialism in itself is inherently brutal, genocidal, exploitative, and oppressive. Like colonialism is an oppressive institution. And in order for colonialism to be able to establish a colonial state, you're going to have to use force from the very beginning, because the people are not going to give up their liberty, give up their freedom, give up their culture. I'm talking about their way of life without a fight. And so it took force for the colonizer to enslave African people, to colonize African people, and to take and to take over lands, to colonize the lands of Africa, but also to colonize the Americas. it would take that force. Now, what Dr. Wilson is talking about, though, is like that type of force. You're not going to be able to sustain a society by constantly using force against a people, because you're going to have to continuously expend your resources to be able to have a army or a military or create a unit or organization to be able to continuously apply that force against a group of people. And so also when you apply force against people, like they know, they're conscious of their oppression. They're conscious that they're being oppressed, enslaved, and colonized. And so they're going to constantly be resisting that, because it's innate in us to want to be free. We want to be a free and liberated people. So in order for people to accept conditions of servitude or subjugation, is that they have to think that they're either free, or there's no other means of living outside of the condition that they're in now. Like they accept it because of some sort of manipulation or influence by the people who are in positions of power. And so there's a book by B.F. Skinner I always bring up. It's called Beyond Freedom and Authority by B.F. Skinner. I think it's called Beyond Freedom, and I'm gonna look it up in a second. But in the book, B.F. Skinner is basically arguing in the book that you can control or enslave a people, or people will accept their enslavement or oppression if you can get them to think that they are free. So it's going beyond like creating institutions, creating ideas, creating this structure to make a people feel that they're free, even if they're not free. And so this was written in the early 20th century. This is what the colonizer does. They're looking for ways to be able to manipulate and control the people, and they write books about it, and they have discourse about it. But anyway, when I was reading this, one of the things that I was thinking in regards to this force, because it's not efficient, so there has to be other types of power that is used to control people. And so manipulation is one of those, influence, right? You have to legitimize, the person that's in power has to legitimize their power. And one of the things I was thinking about was the movie Roots. And in the movie Roots, you had Kunta Kinte, who was enslaved, taken from Africa, brought to the Americas. And I'm just using that as a symbol, as a sort of an analogy of the collective African experience. So Kunta Kinte is whipped into submission. He's whipped, he's not initially whipped into submission, but he's whipped, and he accepts the name Toby, the Christian name Toby that was given to him, over the name Kunta Kinte. Now he accepts it in front of the slave master, but Kunta Kinte, though, always, even after that whipping, was always looking to liberate himself and go back to Africa. He tried to escape, and they wound up mutilating him, chopping off half his foot. He tries to escape like 2 times, I think. And then he eventually accepts his condition of servitude. Physically, he accepts it. Mentally, he's still in Africa, but he has been whipped to the point where he feels as though, even though he longs to go back to Africa, he feels like he's not going to be able to escape his condition or his position within the slaveocracy that he's now in America. So he's been beaten and defeated in that sense. But then there's other people. There was a childhood friend of his named Fanta, and Fanta was different from Kunta in the sense that Fanta accepted it from the beginning, accepted her name, accepted the conditions that she was in. She was beaten into submission from the very beginning. And it reminds me, though, of our collective experience where we have some people who have accepted, we have been terrorized and beaten for 400 to 500 years. And there has been this acceptance of the situation that we're in by a lot of Africans. They accept the names, they accept the language, the religion, all of those things that have been forced upon us. And then there's others who, on the surface, it may seem as though they accept it because they use the language, they've taken on the names, but in their mind, they're still longing for an escape. They're still longing for an escape from this condition that they're in, and this relationship that they have with racists and colonizers. They, like they'll tell you that racism exists in the system, but they won't do anything to try to end the system, right? And so that's another type. And then there's straight the radical. Like there's nothing that you can do or say for them to accept their condition. And they're continuously. So that's a third, type of person right there. They're continuously fighting, trying to dismantle, kill the slave master, and so forth. But when that happens, well, let me go to the next. I'm going to read the next section before I build even further. So Dr. Wilson said, force as an inefficient power. In the context of the modern nation state, the use of force as the primary regulator of social power relations, as the primary means of achieving the results desired by power holders, is more often than not inefficient, counterproductive, and fraught with onerous complexities and unintended outcomes. It is also often socially, economically, and materially costly to exert and maintain, as we was just talking about. So Wrong perceptively notes as follows: force is more effective in preventing or restricting people from acting than in causing them to act in a given way. Force can achieve negative effects, the destruction, prevention, or limitation of the possibility of action by others. But one cannot forcibly manipulate the limbs and bodies of others in order to achieve complex positive results. The fabrication or construction of something, the operation of a machine, the performance of a physical or mental skill. So when you read this entire chapter and they're talking about the other forms of power, you're going to see like what force undergirds. So there's coercion, there's manipulation, there's influence. Like all of these things are used to get a person to act or behave in a particular way. Dr. Wilson is making it clear that force, you can't force a person to actually do something, right? Now, there can be the threat of force that can cause you to do something. If you know a person is going to, shoot you or cause some sort of physical harm to you, then you'll say, okay, let me do this to avoid that physical harm. So the threat of force, right? But he's making it clear, like force is more effective in restricting or preventing somebody from doing something. So for instance, rebellion, this go back to like the Stonewall Rebellion or Nat Turner's Rebellion. In order to keep those enslaved Africans from liberating or freeing themselves, they had to use force, and they had to go all the way with that force and kill those people who were rebelling, right? And so the actual use of force prevented them from making it to Georgia, from liberating and freeing themselves, or from dismantling and toppling the system of slavery, right? They had to use physical force. Now, the murder of those people, the putting their heads on spikes, what they did with the Angolans who tried to free themselves during the Stonewall Rebellion. They put their heads on spikes for others to see. Now, that was used as a threat to manipulate others or influence others from not doing what they did, right? And so there's those, and when we read further, we're going to get into those other types or forms of power that is used. But when I think about how Africans, right, when we're talking about effective means of force, I was just having a conversation with, a more effective use of power. I was having a conversation recently, right, about an hour ago or half an hour ago about the Big Six. And I want to use them as an example of how power can be used, right, without using force, a more effective means of power, which I probably could use for another section, but I was inspired to talk about this. So I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to end it after this, not abruptly, but been going for 15 minutes right now. So this is the Big Six, right? When I'm talking about the Big Six, I'm talking about during the civil rights movement. There was the Dr. King, James Farmer, like there were 6 civil rights leaders that were put at the head of the civil rights movement, right? And who was handpicked by the colonizer. And so I want to show you what the colonizer did to be able to control the civil rights movement in their attempt to control it. So Malcolm X talks about the big six, right? If you listen to the message to the grassroots speech, he mentions as the big six. He mentions as Steve Currier, this white man who funded the big six and how they were able to control it. Now, many people at the time probably thought Malcolm was being a hater, but he was actually reading the account from a newspaper article that was written. It was someone else's research that Malcolm was bringing to light. So am I sharing this? I think I'm sharing this. Okay. So let me read. I'm just going to read these first two paragraphs. So the Big Six, they will form the Council for the United Civil Rights Leadership. It was an umbrella group formed in June 1963 to organize and regulate the civil rights movement. You hear that language, right? It was an umbrella group formed in June 1963 to organize and regulate the civil rights movement. The council brought leaders of Black civil rights organizations together with white donors in business and philanthropy. It successfully arranged the August 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom with the Kennedy administration. Remember, Malcolm in the message to the grassroots, he talked about it was the grassroots who was attending to march on Washington. It was the grassroots. Remember what was it, January 6th, when they had stormed the Capitol? This is what Black folks was talking about doing in 1963. They were talking about storming the Capitol. It wasn't, no Dr. King and James Forman and these civil rights leaders who were saying do this. It was the grassroots who said, hey, we had enough. And so what the colonizer did, these colonizers, racists, right? They said, hey, we're going to have to get ourselves in front of this. And so let me read this last paragraph. It says the council encompassed groups with different strategies and agendas, from the Radical Student Nonviolent Coordinated Committee to the Conservative National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. By centralizing donations, the formation of the group muted disagreements over funding and membership. It worked to oppose tactics. This is important. It worked to oppose tactics like civil disobedience and boycotts by controlling distribution of funds and by virtue of connections to the media establishment. Conflict nevertheless overcame the group quickly, and as more money and power declined gradually until dissolution in 1967. That wasn't really too important, and the point that I'm making. So ultimately, the Big Six was getting funding from Steve Currier, this white man who created the Tectonic Foundation. And because they're receiving funding from Steve Currier and whatever other donors, they were able to influence what the Big Six could do and not do. So they couldn't be as radical as they wanted to be if they wanted to continue to get this funding. So it's very, let me look over here. So it's very, very important to understand that. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is power. Because of the lack of resources that the Big Six has and that Africans have, what we usually do if somebody comes, and this is a lesson to be learned, when somebody's coming with funding and saying, hey, we can fund this movement, those people who are funding, if it's coming from the outside and you're dependent on that funding, they can have some influence and say on the direction that you're going. And this is an exercise of power right here. So I want to leave it there, though. I actually went longer than I expected, but I want to appreciate everybody for getting on. Again, this conversation today was about force as power, how inefficient force is power. And we're going to talk more about force as power next time we get together. But we're going to go into psychic violence, coercion, manipulation, influence, because it's important that we understand these different types of forms of power that is used. And ultimately, it should be our objective to be able to counterbalance this or countervail the force that is used against us, or the threat of force that is used against us. What happens is, even sometimes that threat of force that is used against us, sometimes we sort of imagine this force to be even more than it is. And that's something that we have to overcome. It's this because of 400, 500 years of the use of force against African people, now we have developed sort of this idea that that we can't overcome the force of the colonizer or the oppressor. but there's no group on Earth from dawn of time that has been able to secure their position for infinity, for for perpetuity. There's no group of people that has been able to do that. So this American white man and this European, they're not invincible, and so we have to be able to understand that we have to meet force or with equal power or more power, and African people being the majority, representing the majority of people on this planet, and all oppressed people, representing the majority, is very doable. So with that being said, man, I want to appreciate everybody for getting on, and maybe I'll look in the chat and see what folks said. See the chat going a little bit. Appreciate y'all too. Y'all be showing the support, showing the support. Yeah, keep tuning in, man. Let me know if y'all want to come up too anytime and build as I continue to do this. What I'll do is I'll put a link in the chat, and we can discuss this text. So just let me know, because I'm gonna keep doing this. We're gonna go through this whole book, and it's good now, but it really is going to get good when we get to actual institutions that we can be building. Actually like implementing programs to build to implement the blueprint, where we're creating the blueprint, where it's not just a blueprint on paper, but we're creating a blueprint for other Africans to see. That's the what I'm looking forward to. So yes, for sure. Appreciate y'all. All right. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna keep it up. Y'all keep tuning in, all right? All right, so until next time, man, just peace, Black power, continue to build, continue to study, and we're gonna be liberated. Uhuru, Amani.